Hello, and we're back here. Sorry, we had bad connection. This is the problem with doing live streams. For some reason, we're just getting some bad internet connection. But we are back, and I'll wait for you guys to get back on. Okay, we're back. Can you guys see me? It says it's working, so I'm gonna assume it's working. So let's take some calls from you guys. I think Catman was trying to call up. Let me see if I can. Let me see if I can give this guy. Hello. Pano Costoros, I appreciate your comments. If you want to give me a call, here's my Discord. Yes, I remember interviewing you. You've been following us for a long time, so I really appreciate that. But I gave you the okay. We got a call here. Hello. Yes, Catman, you can give me a call. Hello. 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 Is this Cat?
Hey, how you doing?
Yeah.
Hey Ted, how you doing?
I'm doing good. Yourself?
I'm doing all right.
I believe we talked before. You're from Alabama or Florida?
No, I'm from Jacksonville, Florida.
Okay. Yeah, Florida.
My question as far as what you've been talking about the Protestant Reformation, and you're absolutely right. Luther was a pretty creepy guy. But the main question that I wanted to focus on is the Protestant Reformation and the Turks, because what I see in the near future is that dealing with the Protestant nations, they're going to align themselves with Turkey against Russia.
Yeah.
And
go ahead.
Yeah, I do see a war between Russia and Turkey. I've been seeing that for quite some time. It's coming.
It's inevitable, yeah, because they both are pursuing empire, but at the same time their interests collide. They can't work together. They're going to clash.
Yes, I've been seeing that for quite some time. For the last, I'd have to say 2016. So we're both on the same page. And they fought before, and every time Russia fought against Turkey, Russia won.
Yeah, Russia wins almost all. There was one time, I believe, in like the 1800s when Russia was defeating the Turks, but then the British intervened and told Russia to stop, and then Turkey for some reason was declared the winner. But it's like doesn't make any sense.
Oh man! But in the end, I believe that Russia will fight with Jesus, and I actually believe that.
Okay, and what makes you? Where is that in the Bible? Where is that in the scripture? Like, why do you believe that?
To me, and in Matthew chapter 5, not Matthew, but in Micah chapter 5, Jesus fights with the 7 nations and stuff. Well, Russia's going to be a part of that.
But it doesn't say Russia.
Right, but it doesn't say Russia. Or are you just assuming that Russia's a part of that?
I believe that Russia's a part of that. That's just an assumption.
Okay, hold on a second. I'm trying to reconnect. My live feed got disconnected on Facebook for some reason.
Okay.
Hold on. No worries. Hold on a second here. But anyway, okay, so my dad's gonna get in the conversation here in a little bit. But you think that there's going to be a clash between Russia and Christ?
No, I believe that
Hold on.
Russia and Turkey in the near future will fight. That's going to happen. I'm talking about as far as the ultimate clash. Jesus is going to fight the Antichrist, who will come from Turkey, and Russia will be one of the nations that will fight with him.
Okay. Hold on one second.
You are absolutely right. But the problem with your answer is that you do not know why you're right. And I'm going to tell you. I'm going to tell you why you're right. Okay? I'm going to walk through with you where you can find Russia in the scriptures. I'm going to go through them one by one, but bear with me because I like to get the references exactly from the scriptures as I peruse the writings of what I'm working on. And this is this mega book that really delves into the subject of biblical prophecies. Okay. First of all, you find the whole idea of Gog and Magog. We understand that in Ezekiel 38 and also in Revelation.
That's Turkey.
Yeah, Magog would be, in fact, if you take the serious historians, the serious scholars that understand what Meshech, Tubal, Beth Togarma are, and they are in the landmass between the Caspian Sea and the Black Sea. It's not just Turkey, it's also Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, which we've seen just lately. Okay, now.
The Central Asian nations.
Correct. The battle starts in the book of Revelation, right from the beginning in Asia Minor. In fact, it tells us that Pergamum, that's the seat of Satan. The seat of Satan on earth is Pergamum. That's the seat of the Antichrist. There's no question about that one. Okay. And then he goes into Gog and Magog. Then if you take a look at the temple when it was destroyed, even by Titus, if you look at who destroyed the temple, whether it's Titus or whether it's Antiochus Epiphanes who desecrated the temple, you find in Daniel chapter 11, and the people of the prince who is to come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. Why does it say the people of the prince who is to come? The prince who is to come is the Antichrist. The people of the Antichrist who is to come later on are the ones who destroy the temple. And in fact, it was Fretenses. The Romans, this is the misunderstanding of the Protestant commentaries, is that when they see that, oh, okay, well, the Romans destroyed the temple. Well, wait a minute here. It doesn't say the empire that destroyed the temple. It says the people of the prince who is to come. And the Roman Empire, the way it structured its military, its cohorts and its infantry all came from the peoples that basically were allies with Rome. Nabateans, Syrians, Thracians. They were basically from that same region. Even it's the same people that Antiochus led, is the same people that destroyed the temple in 70 AD. The same people. It's the same people.
Which I do know Josephus talked about that.
Correct.
He goes into a lot of detail.
Correct. Yes. It's the Fretenses, the 10th Legion, the 5th Legion, the 15th Legion. And if you look at Josephus and the historians, what were these legions made of? They were made of peoples that were from Nabatea, from Syria, from all the way from Bosnia, all the way from Bosnia, all the way from Serbia, all the way, where the trouble really is. Okay, now we get into the idea of what you're talking about, and that is Russia. The whole quagmire begins with the West they really are anti-Russia because, at one point, and they were right that Russia fell into communism. Russia did not defend its Tsar. Lenin, a Jew from Germany, basically was sent there to invoke communism into Russia, which Russia finally was healed from the issue of communism. It's not complete healing. Nothing is complete. And Russia basically, is probably one of the only countries that are anti-LGBT. It's probably, and it is basically standing against all tides when it comes to the issues of these moral depravities that we have. Okay, now, I want to get into some of those prophecies and let me find them. Let's see. Hold on a second. Okay. Now, when we look at Isaiah 59, it says in Isaiah 59, according to their deeds, so I will repay. He's talking about the end times. Wrath to his adversaries, repayment to his enemies, to the coastlands, basically that's Europe. He will render repayment, so they shall fear the name of the Lord from the west. Fear, because he's punishing those, the west and the coastlands. And his glory from the east, his glory from the rising sun. If you take a look at the map of Russia, it extends eastwards beyond Japan. It's the most east when it comes to its extremities to the east. So Russia is north and east. So the glory of God comes from that region. Now, you might say that's not conclusive, and it's not, just because it says from the east. However, if we understand the rest of the prophecies, it will all click. Let's see, hold on. I have to skip through, you have to excuse me because I'm skipping through all the mentions of Russia in my book, and sometimes it's not related. And so bear with me just for a little bit. Okay, when it says that God would destroy the beast, he says, I will raise against him 7 shepherds, and you're right. It says he will raise mighty nations, mightier than the system of the Antichrist. They're stronger than militarily than the system of Antichrist. It tells us that the system of the Antichrist is not the most powerful. And so therefore, we might have to choose, well, who are more powerful than, let's say, a Turkic alliance with other nations? There's the United States, and there's Russia, there's some parts of Europe, Italy. But Daniel tells us the ships of Chittim comes against him. And by the way, that's not just a fulfillment under Antiochus. The ships of Chittim are the Romans, and they will give him a heavy blow. So you have one part of the element, and that is the military might of Spain and Italy, which they have a much better military armada when it comes to their navy. The navy of these countries are more powerful than Turkey, and it gives them a heavy blow. It means it fights against them. That's one part of the element of the Spencer that comes against Turkey. Now, hold on.
Is that person still there?
Yeah, are you still there? Hello?
Oh my God, this internet connection is intolerable.
Intolerable.
Yeah, Discord. Discord's got so many freaking glitches. Start Discord over again. Lately, it's just been disastrous. Anyway,
we'll get the caller back. Is it working?
No, it's just this Discord disconnected. So annoying. Most annoying thing ever. This is Discord.
So they all have to come sign back in?
No, they don't. Doesn't want to work. And the internet doesn't want to work either. It's just nothing wants to work. Everything's disconnected.
You were in Pixelin and
No,
that's...
it wasn't. It was in fact.
Oh, okay. Are we back on?
No, hold on. We're back. I think we're still on YouTube.
We're on YouTube.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hello?
I'm still here.
Okay, good. So let's continue on. Now we come to, this is why this book is so crucial, because it talks about unpopular prophecies in which people don't even focus on. You come to Isaiah chapter 41.
Okay.
And look what it says. And I quote from verses 14 to 15. Speak tenderly to Jerusalem and proclaim to her that her hard service has been completed. In other words, Jerusalem suffers, Israel suffers, and God is going to end that suffering. Okay? That her sin has been paid for, that she has received from the Lord's hand double for all her sins. That's why it says Babylon is fallen twice, double. And let's and that's why in John he says the great city. John calls the harlot the great city, and John in chapter 11 of Revelation, the two witnesses are killed, martyred where? In the great city, which where our Lord was crucified. No question, it's Jerusalem. So God here says, okay, you got your double payment, you got your double punishment. Now I'm going to rescue them. It's very interesting. It says, do not be afraid, you worm Jacob. A worm, nothing. Okay, little Israel. Do not fear, for I myself will help you, declares the Lord your Redeemer, the Holy One of Israel. See, I will make you into a threshing sledge, new and sharp with many teeth. You will thresh the mountains and crush them and reduce the hills to chaff. But who helps them? And who will God send to help them? It will be to the surprise of the Protestant interpreters who misinterpreted Gog. It will be the same nation that destroyed Nazism and opened the camps during the Holocaust, Russia. And I quote, and I quote, I have raised up one from the north, and he has come one from the east, who invokes my name. He will march over rulers as if they were mud, like a potter who treads the clay. That's amazing. Here's why. Keep in mind, this one must come. Only one. The direction that is considered both east and north at the same time. How does one come from the north and the extremities of the east at the same time? Which country in the world that is north and goes to extremities all the way past the rising sun of Japan? Only Russia does. And he says he invokes my name. In other words, he comes as a true Christian. And he helps Jerusalem. And he liberates Jerusalem from the onslaught of the Turks. And it's very interesting. Take a look at the map of, let's say, the world, and just take a look at Russia and tell me, and take a look at Japan and tell me how far east does it go and how far north does it go. But that's not the only conclusive element of this equation, because take a look at Daniel chapter 11, verse 44 to 45. Daniel 11, verses 44 to 45 really ends all arguments about this Gog being Russia with the Protestants teach. Here's what it says. But reports from the east and the north, that's the same reference in Isaiah 41. East and north. Extremities. Reports from the east and the north will alarm him. That's the bad one. That's this Assyrian. And he will set out in a great rage to destroy and annihilate many. He will pitch his royal tents between the seas at the beautiful holy mountain. Yet he will come to his end and no one will help him. The reports that comes from the east and the north is what destroys him. This is the same link to Isaiah chapter 41. And that's becomes the Jesus-style question is, if Gog, Magog is Russia, if this is Gog and Magog, and that it is Russia, what's north of Russia? Because it says bad reports come from the north. North of Russia is what? An ocean. There's nothing there. And so this Gog has to be north enough, but there's something north of him that is more powerful than him that destroys him. And so you can't escape that. Now you go to Micah 5, and this one shall be peace. When the Assyrian, God calls him the Assyrian, comes into our land. What did Assyria occupy? Asia Minor, the same peoples that came to destroy the temple, the same peoples that Antiochus Epiphanes came from, the same peoples that threatened Israel, the same people that are now sitting in Hagia Sophia, making it back to a mosque. The same people of Muhammad II that took over Hagia Sophia and Constantinople because the Protestants don't care about history. When the Assyrian comes into our land and when he treads into our palaces, then we will raise against him 7 shepherds and 8 princely men. They shall waste with the sword the land of Assyria. Assyria went all the way to Turkey, by the way.
It did.
Of course. And the land of Nimrod. That's the land of the Antichrist. At its entrances. Why does it call it the land of Nimrod? Ever wonder about that? You know? Because it's talking about this ancient Babel. Nimrod, he's the one that founded Babel. And that's why in Genesis chapter 10, it gives you the names of the cities. And it says, it calls all these the great city. And so it's talking about this mystery Babylon in the future, which really is many cities. That's something we got into before. Maybe we get into it at some other point in time. But just back to your issue, is that there you have the report coming against him from the north, and he will come to his end. In other words, the reports from the north and the east bring the Antichrist's end. And Isaiah 41 tells us that he comes from the north and the east, comes in God's name, and he will thresh many nations and destroys them. Now it becomes very interesting, because you look at some of the saints, monks, and I'm talking about Orthodox, not Catholic, Orthodox, in Greece, say Pesaios and some others, and you study their things, they're not aware of these prophecies. They had intuition, prophecies from God. The Holy Spirit revealed it to them, and they said that they described the end of days war between the Turks and the Russians to such T that it shook me up, because they're not quoting the scriptures, and here the scriptures matches what these saints are saying, and that will be the return of Hagia Sophia. Now, if you think that Hagia Sophia is insignificant, what do you do? What do you do with the scripture which says that his temple, God has his temple on the utmost sides of the north? It becomes interesting, because you think of a temple in Jerusalem. But no, he tells you there's a temple in the utmost sides of the north. The same reference. When you see Isaiah 14, the Assyrian, he will sit on the mount of the congregation on the sides of the north. It's a church, it's a temple that's in the extremity of the north, that the Antichrist wants to sit in to proclaim himself to be God. That's not Jerusalem, because it says the extremities of the north. Now, if you go to the Protestant interpreters, what do they do when it says this extremities of the north? Read Isaiah 14 very carefully. They don't know what to do with it. They say, well, maybe it's because in Jerusalem, Old Temple, the Holy of Holies was in the north side, and they make these assumptions, the crazy assumptions. It doesn't make any sense. Because the same reference of the extremities of the north is the same reference you find in Ezekiel 38 regarding Gog and Magog. They come from the extremities of the north. I sit on the mount of the congregation in the extremities of the north. That's what the Antichrist wants to do. And so it's not like there's no references. There is, you can basically unlock the scriptures by looking at the text very carefully and examining it very carefully. So in essence, what you have a group of people who say Russia is the bad guy. You have also a group of people in the ancient times where they said Rome is the bad guy. And that's the Hebrews when they declared war against Rome and they were crushed. And Christ had a different plan and he converted Rome. And Paul went to Rome and Peter went to Rome and the church was established in Rome. And then that's why Romans 1 says, saints, he greets the people at Rome. And so you have the element of God establishing several temples. But he sits in the temple of God, so he has to sit in a physical temple, And Isaiah 14 tells us it's the one in the extremities of the north. That's going to tick off the Russians. What they're doing in Hagia Sophia, the Turks, is ticking off the Orthodox. It's ticking off the Orthodox Christians.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. And so, but Orthodox Christians, they have Eucharist. They're not evangelicals. They're not messianic. They're not Bible-believing Christians, and so we must eliminate the Orthodox Christians as non-Christians. And this is a question I asked from many my evangelical friends. What do you do with the Coptic Christians, the Serbian Christians, the Orthodox Christians? In fact, I asked that from a good friend of mine. I said, we were watching ISIS beheading Coptic Christians, and this Coptic Christian, while being beheaded, slicing his neck, his vocal cords are still functioning, and then his last words, he's saying, "Ya Yeshua, Ya Yeshua, Yeshua, Jesus," and his gargling blood in his throat as they're cutting his neck off. And he's gargling and saying, "Ya Yeshua." His last words was, "Jesus, Jesus." He was given the choice, accept Islam and we will spare you. He chose the scimitar of ISIS. I said, what do you do with that? I showed them the video. Yeah, I said, here's the video. What do you do with this guy? They said, he's not saved. He's not saved.
They are brothers and sisters.
Of course. The one who says they're not saved is not the brother and sister. You see?
Yeah, something else that I also see is that Isaiah 10 is being fulfilled with Erdogan as the Assyrian.
Wait a minute, you must have access to my book secretly. How did you know all this?
No, I read the Bible.
You read the Bible, very good. Because you see, the interpreters would think that Isaiah chapter 10 fulfilled is in Sanharib. But remember, Jesus, when he see the abomination of desolation, had Jesus never said that, we would think these prophecies are strictly speaking of Antiochus Epiphanes. But because Jesus said that, he's talking about repetition. And so Isaiah 10, and then you get to Isaiah 11, becomes more interesting even. In Isaiah 10, you think it's Sanharib coming to Israel, is not Kalno like Karchamish, is not Hama like Arfad. And you go to the Protestant interpretations, not Kalno like Karchamish, is not Hama like Arfad. They don't know what this is Sanharib. He's just basically letting off some steam here. Where's Kalno? Kalno is where Babel was. Really, it's one of the cities of Babel. Kalla, Kalno. Okay. Erech, Aqad, all of these were part of Babel. It's not Kalno like Karchamish, but where is Karchamish? Karchamish is in Turkey. He says, why is Kalno not part of Karchamish? Why is not Iraq part of Turkey? Why is Samaria not part of Turkey, Israel? Why is Jerusalem not part of Turkey, part of the Ottomans? That's what he's saying.
And all he talks about is how he wants to conquer that region.
Correct.
He's obsessed with this.
Correct. But will he be the one or not? We don't know. Somebody could come after him. Somebody probably not even as Islamist as he is. Because let's face it. It wasn't Abdul Hamid, the last who killed the Armenians. They abdicted Khilafah from the Caliphate, and the young Turks took over, and the young Turks got all their ideology, most of it, from the humanists and from the eugenists. And so they was very influenced with the West. And then so they looked at the Armenians as less than human, and then they basically ordered the annihilation of the Armenians. And so it was an ultra-nationalist group. And so right now Erdogan have united with the ultra-nationalists who are not really Islamist, but they have a unity pact together. It is going to be more dangerous from those kind of folks where the killing begins. Because let's face it, the Holocaust wasn't committed by Islamists. It was committed by eugenists, and all of that came from what? It didn't come from Islam. It came from Martin Luther. Really, it came all trickled down from Protestantism and from Luther. And this is why the Bible does address the Protestant issue or the Protestant problem. It does very well. And if I explained it all from the text, go carefully within that, the reason they hate the Eucharist and the reason they hate the sacrifice, and where the Bible tells us that they will prosper, and they did prosper. And when you look at taking 1/3 of the rivers, the waters basically is poisoned, 1/3 of it. If you take Protestantism, it's really 1/3 of Christendom. 2/3 would be Catholic and Orthodox, but Protestantism is 1/3 of it. And so that collaborated with the Ottomans. The collaboration was immense with the Protestants and the Ottomans. And this is my American friends, God bless them, the evangelicals. I love these people. They don't know the history. They don't understand the history behind their Luther.
They're ahistoric.
They're ahistoric. They don't understand Calvin. They don't understand Manichaeism. So they believe these authors who sit there and compliment Manichaeism, they compliment the Cathars, they compliment the Bogomils. If we go into a discussion of what the Bogomils are and what the Cathars are, and they say these are Bible-believing Christians. Take a look, for example, Woman Rides the Beast by Dave Hunt. I met Dave Hunt. We were good friends. I loved Dave Hunt. When he meant well, but he was wrong. And he wrote a book, Woman Rides the Beast. And I remember in one TV interview in Texas, I looked at Dave Hunt. I said, Mr. Hunt, I have a Jesus-style question. When I ask a Jesus-style question, there's no way to answer it. I said, why is it that every time I ask you to give me a literal name of a literal country that God mentions in the scripture that he refers to Rome being the harlot? Why is it when I ask you to prove that, you always give me an allegory? You tell me, oh, they're dressed up in silk red and this kind of thing. But whenever I tell you that it's not Rome, that the Antichrist comes from the Muslim world, basically, or from Asia Minor, I'm always giving you a literal reference. I give you a literal reference. You know, who was Gomer, Beit Togarma? Who are these people? You know, he was a historic. He didn't know anything about history. And you'd see the interview, he just paused, didn't know what to do with the question. The question destroyed his whole book on Rides of the Beast, basically. He destroyed it, killed it. There's no way around it. Because his whole book is centered about focus on Rome being the harlot of Babylon. And that doesn't work. You can't write a book and
because Paul blessed the Roman people.
Yeah, and
he wrote an entire book to talk about it.
But it's not only that. The whole book, if you read book, let's say Woman Rides the Beast, the whole book is riddled with saying that when the Catholic wars against the Manichaeans, against the Cathars, against the Bogomils, you know, he was saying these were Bible-believing Christians that Rome killed.
No, they weren't.
They were so evil. These people were so evil, they needed killing. They needed to be annihilated. They were like the Canaanites and the Philistines. They were into open sex. They were open. What did the Manichaeans believe? What was the communion of the Manichaean?
They were extremely corrupt.
No, let me tell you about the communion of the Manichaeans. They would have human semen. They dip the bread in the semen and they take that as their Eucharist. Why? Because the semen has the life. And so that's the Manichaean. And so that from the Manichaean heresy went all the way down, and you know, it went all the way down, trickled all the way down to the Cathars, and from the Cathars you had the Protestant Reformation. Yeah, the Protestant Reformation was a product of this Cathar, of Tyndale. So Tyndale was a martyr. And see, here's another problem. Here's another major problem with the Protestant interpretations. The woman drinks the blood of the saints. There's a harlot. She's consumed the blood of the saints, right? She kills the saints. She's filled with the blood of the saints. In other words, she persecutes the saints, kills so many Christians, it's ridiculous. And so here's the problem for the Protestant interpretation in their eschatological interpretation. Because in order to have them be the saints, you have to show Rome killing millions of Protestants. You can't find it. What you find is Protestants. And so they have to, so in order to kind of make this interpretation stick, they had to go find millions of saints. And that's where the Cathars came in. And that's why you find Tim LaHaye, Dave Hunt, the commentaries, oodles of books and commentaries for the last 200, 300 years talking about how Rome is the harlot because she drank the blood of the Catharis and the Bogomils, and they made those be Bible-believing Christians when they really were not. And so the whole fabrication. And so they write these books, and who you know, I mean, if I read to you some of these quotes from the Calvinist, what's his name? MacArthur, John MacArthur. John MacArthur talks about.
He's a total heretic.
Yeah, he's a Calvinist, and he talks about the Cathars, and you know, and how the Cathars were Bible-believing Christian. I would love to debate this guy. He's clueless about the Cathars. Oh no, he's not clueless. You see, that's the difference. They're not clueless about the Cathars. They're not clueless about the Manichaean heresy. They're not clueless about these things. They have a major problem. They cannot find Rome killing Bible-believing Christians. Why? Why you do not find from the Protestant sect much martyrdoms? You can't say Tyndale is a martyr, because if you look at Tyndale, he's a heretic of the first class. Well, the reason is very simple, because God in the prophecy in Revelation chapter 11 very clearly said, and the temple, the court that is without the altar, measure it not. Don't test it. It's not going to get tested, for they are given to the who? To the nations who will tread the holy city for 1,260 days. They will work with the Ottomans, and they will tread the holy city for 1,260 days. Yeah. And so I just basically, I touched on a dust of evidence. And that's why, I need to finish this book. I'm in the 500 and some pages, 548 pages to be exact, which explains all this, I had to put notes in every single line. Notes are important to show what historian said what and to prove my points. And so it's monumental task to do it. It's one of a kind book, because it's never an issue never been addressed. And this is why when James White offered to debate, I said to him, I want to debate you on that issue. I have the emails. That issue, you people say that you harlot is Rome and it's drank the blood of the saints, and then you must show me all the martyrs. And I must discuss with you all the Protestant books and commentaries to prove beyond shadow of a doubt that you have no martyrs. He retreated. He retreated immediately. He accused me of being rude and retreated. Yes, because you have to understand the debating spirit. The debating spirit wants to debate things like, Protestantism versus Catholicism. Let's pick on Mary, Mother of God. Let's pick on this and this and that, and let's pick on theological issues. They will never debate historical issues. You rarely would see a debate between an evangelical and a Catholic over the historical issues. Why? Because the evangelical knows once the evangelical learns history, he's no longer an evangelical Protestant. He becomes Catholic or Orthodox. That's why Hank Hanegraaff, the Bible answer man, no one was like Hank Hanegraaff. I remember I grew up in those times listening to Hank Hanegraaff. 1993, when I first I was in the Baptist church, and the guy was phenomenal. He memorized the scriptures. I mean, he was the Bible answer man. And if that wise man got to the conclusion that he should become Orthodox, that made me think twice. And so this is the wise ones that will say, what caused Hank Hanegraaff to become Orthodox? Most people say, just ignore it. Why would Walid Shoaibat become Catholic? Just ignore it. That's it. He's a heretic Catholic. It's the heretic who accuses the real to be heretic. And that's the problem. Yeah. Anyway. Theodore?
Is he there?
Ted!
Yeah.
He's too far away. Sorry about that.
But thank you for answering my question. Thank you. And you confirmed what the Lord had been showing me. So I'm not going crazy.
No, you're not. You're not going crazy, but always try to confirm what you think from evidence, and the biblical evidence is key.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
You bet.
All right. Thank you.
God bless.
All right, whoever wants to call in can do so. I think Panzer wanted to call. If you want to do that, go ahead. We can answer the questions here. Let's see here. Do you think,
Daniel 8.
Do you think the prophetic days could be years? 334 AD, Alexander came against Persia.
Okay. Some smoking alien, Daniel 8. The 2,300 days of the prophecy. Do you think the prophetic days are there? There really are days, but that doesn't mean that, in a sense, you can also put them in years. I believe both are correct. Answer it. I believe both are correct. In fact, in the book, I show the 1,260 days from a perspective of years, and we do have a match. And so, but the reason it tells us it's days is because the time in the end, really, the whole history is shoved into just 7 years, the last 7 years. And this is why it tells us you have to calculate it by dates, because he's telling us, you have to understand prophecy. Declaring the end from the beginning, Isaiah says, for I am God, there is no other. I am God, there's none like me. Declaring the end from the beginning. So what is that? So in other words, when you look at prophecy, it's really about the end declared in the beginning. But if you look at the instruction, what does he say? He says, remember the things of old, for I am God and there is no other. I am God, there's none like me, foretelling the end from the beginning. Remember the things of old. In other words, always keep in mind the history, he's saying, that God repeats the history in these prophecies, but it's declared strictly for the end, paralleled from the things of old, repeated, as Solomon the Wise says, history repeats. There's nothing new under the sun. History repeats. So it's a repeat, not exactly the same, but in the fashion. And that's why we need prophecies, because it gives us how they mimic the old, but how they have their own variant fulfillment than from the old. Okay, what else? They have
online.
Panzer. Panzer?
Yes, sir.
How are you?
I'm great. I love listening to you.
Thank you.
Dang, I just don't know where to start with some of the questions I have. I had actually forgotten the Manichaean communion thing, and then you reminded me, and now I regret eating.
Oh gosh, it's disgusting. I mean, that's
Yeah, I can't. I used to have arguments with back when I was still a Protestant, but learning because of you and Theodore's book. I was trying to tell people that these were not Bible-believing Christians. Nobody would hear me out. That
of course not. Because ears they have, yet they do not hear. Eyes they have, yet they do not see. And that's why the prophecy of Isaiah is fulfilled in them. And that's what Christ talked about when they didn't listen to Christ. And he says, eyes they have, they do not see. That the prophecy of Isaiah is fulfilled in them. And what was the prophecy of Isaiah? That the destruction of the Hebrews at the time, the loss of Israel in the temple, because they didn't hear Christ. And so this is what you deal with. And that's why you just shake the dust off your feet. Remember, the more that they grow, the less that we grow. It just proves to us that we're on the right track. In other words, we know people get distraught when they see, Christendom or, Christianity dissipate into thin air in the West and all over the world. And we see the moral corruptions and everything that we see, sometimes we feel distraught. But the smaller the numbers, that means you're really heading towards the narrow gate. Jesus said it's a narrow gate. That what he means, that, a narrow gate. What's a narrow gate? Narrow gate, few will enter. So the more you see yourself in the narrow gate is what you need to be encouraged. In other words, you need to start thinking in the opposite fashion. He says, when you save your life, try to save your life, that's when you lose it. If you try to lose your life, that's when you save it.
indeed.
It's the reverse. Think the reverse of the world, and then you got the narrow gate. Ted, I can't see from... Yeah. What else you had on your mind?
Do you think many of these what do you think is going to happen with many of these evangelical churches? Are they fully going to side with ISIS, or do you think many of them are going to keep converting?
It's like anything else. God uses everything for good. Okay. So eventually what happens? I mean, even Luther, when Luther tried to take the book of James, the book of Revelation out, and he was going crazy. And Melanchthon says, hey, you can't do this, Luther. You're crazy. Are you mine? And then Luther dies and Melanchthon takes over, and he is more level-headed, and he does not remove James. And so you had, and so you have to say that many of the evangelicals do have correct theology, but they're lacking. It's like you have 50% of the truth. Eventually, what happens? Eventually, what you have is what's called the Good Samaritan. That's why Jesus gives that, the Good Samaritan. Eventually, you'll have the Good Samaritan. Who's the Samaritan at the time of Jesus? He was the schismatic. He says, Jesus was saying, basically, you have a schismatic person who helped this person, who did actually do something, while the non-schismatic, i.e. Catholic, Orthodox, Pharisee, didn't do anything. So which one of the two did God's will? He put him at a, and that's why even they came to Jesus, they said, hey, these people are preaching over there. They're not part of us. He says, let them be, So God uses it in the end for good. In other words, mankind, I'm always convinced, and in the Bible, throughout the Bible, mankind always learns after a catastrophe. After a catastrophe. If God pulls the plug and, he just sends a bunch of locusts and they eat everything alive as far as plants and people go starving, then marriage problems are fixed. Divorce rates are down. Women want to get married. There's no more bickering. There's no more ordering stuff from Amazon. You're back to basics. That's what mankind needs. COVID, look at COVID, COVID, some families split apart because of COVID, but some families united because of COVID, because they needed each other. They lost their jobs, the family was sick, people died. So that's why sometimes God allows disasters.
That's amazing. I do think a lot of them are going to join with the Antichrist forces. I mean, I saw it back when I was still in Texas at my old church. There were many who would, pretty much praise the rebels in Syria while saying it's God's evil and blah, blah, blah. And I kept trying to tell these people that the rebels are the ones killing the Christians. Why are you praising them? And they would tell me that Assad's a tyrant. But I see that paradigm, even with some of the studies I saw from y'all with the Cristero War, how Baptists and Methodists were supporting them too. It was crazy.
Yeah, in fact, I remember I used to capture videos of, pro-ISIS and separatists from Syria and Islamists and throwing all kinds of canisters and all kinds of. I used to get videos because I knew the Arabic language, and I used to bring a lot of these evidences to show that, hey, it wasn't Bashar al-Assad was not throwing chemicals at his people. Here's the videos. Here's all the evidence. And I remember they went against me. I remember, what was that group that I used to work with, Ted? Intelligentsia group. He said, I think when the Syrian affairs were happening, and yeah, well, I don't. They're a major group that works with the government too here in the U.S. But anyway, they started writing against me, and it's and they started accusing Syria of manufacturing these chemical weapons and to kill their own citizens, and it doesn't make sense. Until today, where are the weapons of mass destruction that Saddam Hussein had? Actually, there's zero evidence for weapons of mass destruction. There is no serious scholar who will tell you Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction. How did the Americans buy this idea? Ted can tell you, what was his name?
It was Ahmed Shalabi.
Ahmed Shalabi, yeah, he bamboozled the Americans to think that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction. And so how is the Middle East doing? What happened to the Christians of the Middle East as a result of America's involvement in Iraq and in Syria? What side?
12 to 1%, I think.
Yeah, and who's giving is Kalno like Karkhamish? Who's giving Karkhamish to the Turks over there? What is Operation Euphrates Shield? That was an American operation. And the Americans pulled out, and basically Turks are in. And so America will always help the Turks. Will always help the Turks. It's part of NATO. Russia is not that part of NATO. And so you will always find America or the Protestants will always be throughout history until the future. The Protestant nations will always be on the side of the Muslims. Don't ever kid yourself. They will be on the sides of the Muslims. It upsets you. It upsets everybody. It can upset us till kingdom comes. That is the case because they are the court that's been left out. And so they will aid the Islamists. And this is why they say, oh, only Obama aided the Islamists. Obama was the one who's basically aiding the Islamists because Obama was Muslim. Oh, okay, well, Trump did the same thing. Euphrates Shield. This is why we keep arguing. No matter, look, there's a lot of things I love about Trump. Don't get me wrong. But there are things I don't like about Trump. I'm balanced. And no matter what you do in America, presidents change, but foreign policy doesn't change. Presidents always change, but foreign policy never changes. It stays the same. Foreign policy doesn't change when it comes to the Middle East, when it comes to the United States of America, when it comes to Russia, whether it's Democrat or Republican, it's the same thing about Russia. It could be Biden, it could be Trump, it could be no matter what. It'll be the same issue about Russia. But, Trump had the courage to, he didn't have this animosity towards Putin. He didn't have animosity towards North Korea because we all think it's North Korea that's going to cause all the damage. And you don't worry about Japan. Japan is more dangerous to me than North Korea.
Like after watching and reading all what you and Theodore have been putting out on Japan, I looked into it myself and I was like, oh my God, they're right.
That's the problem with our writing, is that people who are honest say, well, let me search that sentence he said. Well, let me search that phrase he said. Let me define it's true. You see, but the problem with people who don't want to dig deeper into what we say, you can tell. How does it go? You can tell a zealot, but you can't tell him much. People are zealots. Zealotry is a problem. Sometimes it's good, but sometimes it's bad. You have some zealot, who's so vehemently anti-Russia, that nothing could come good out of Russia. It's like saying what good comes out of Nazareth, What good comes out of Nazareth? The salvation of mankind comes out of Nazareth. The salvation of mankind came out of Beit Lahem, not Jerusalem. This is what I say. I'm from Beit Lahem. I used to go to Jerusalem. I kind of didn't like the Jerusalemites because they were bigoted. Their noses were up. And they thought they were intelligent and very smart and frugal. Beit Lahem was more frugal people. They were more humble people. They were more simple people. They were more... It's like the South versus the North. The people make fun of the Southerners. How's the North doing? How's the wings of this country doing? Versus the middle of this country, versus the south of this country. People are migrating to the south, And so God wants children. He wants the heart of children. He doesn't want pride-filled. That's why scholars can never unlock the scriptures. Paul couldn't unlock the scriptures, and he was a scholar. He had to run into Jesus on the road to Emmaus, and he says to him, hey, why are you persecuting me? That was it, But the scholars of the day couldn't see it. Why? Because scholarly work sometimes blinds people. That's why, Ted's a bookworm. He loves books. In fact, he's the other half of what I needed. He loves books. I come more from the street world, where I kind of love books, but I had a rough life. I never wanted my son to have a rough life like I did, But the two complement each other. And so there's nothing wrong to be scholarly. But there's something wrong when you try to please your scholarly peers every time you try to write something. Jesus didn't please nobody. He says to the Roman centurion, he says, this guy, there's nobody in Israel had the faith of this man. He wants me to heal his servant and didn't want me to go to his house because he does not want me to get into trouble with you people. But he has more faith than anyone I've seen in Israel. It's like what? It's like saying what? It's like meeting a Russian and saying there's nobody in all of America like that Russian. It ticks off people. See, Jesus was always in the habit of ticking off people. He says, you're hanging out with prostitutes and tax collectors. He says, well, the sick needs a doctor. You consider yourself doctors. You don't need no healing, in your opinion. So why should I hang out with you? The prostitute walks in. She cries on his feet. And he says, you didn't even greet me. You didn't even wash my feet. She washed my feet with her tears. My gosh. It just blows your mind how Christ was. And take a look at today's theologian. Is he Christ-like? If he was Christ-like, he'd be barging into the church when the priest is homosexual or molesting children. He will crack a whip. He will do something. But that's not the case.
I wish more people would. I was actually very inspired when Theodore did that to what's the Yaakov? I can't remember.
Yarbrough. Was it Yarbrough? Was it Michael Yarbrough?
Michael Yarbrough.
Yeah. Well, somebody asked a question here. Someone asked me, and I guess I'll just address this now that you brought that up. What is your take on the child sexual abuse in the Catholic Church and how it fits into Bible prophecy? Well, I have no idea. I mean, I have no idea how it fits into Bible prophecy. I guess. Hold on. I guess we could say. I guess we could say that the rise of Sodom, right, correlates with it. My take on the child sexual abuse crisis in the church is that it's very real and it's very ubiquitous. It's all over the place. Do you think that such child sexual abuse within the Catholic Church is linked to occultism? Yes, I do. I suspect. Although I don't have sufficient proof for it. I suspect that there is definitely a satanic connection to it. There was actually a case. I don't know if you heard this one, Sarge, but there was a case of a priest who was having sex with a sadomasochist prostitute on top of the altar of the church.
Yeah, I saw that. I was shocked.
Yeah. Well, I wasn't that shocked, to be honest with you, but I think that is definitely just a demonstration of that occult, the fact that occultism does exist within the ranks of the church. And secondly, I would say that I remember, and this is going to be completely anecdotal, but I went to Italy and I met with nuns who were involved of a weird order in the mountains of northern Italy, and there was some occultism that was going on. So yes, I think there is a link, although I don't have proof that it's like in every single case, but it's definitely there.
Well, as far as
that sounds like a cult that Rasputin was called Calvinists.
Yes, yeah, it is. Yes, exactly.
Yeah, but as far as how does that match in Bible prophecy? I mean, why do you think in Revelation 11:8 the two witnesses die where their Lord was crucified, which is allegorically called Sodom and Egypt? Why? I mean, you got to think about that one. Why do you think Jesus says about his second coming? He says, "Remember Lot's wife." What did Lot's wife do? She looked towards back Sodom. And so Jesus is telling us that the world is going to go back towards Sodom. And that's what everything else comes with Sodom. When Isaiah, can you imagine the Dead Sea Scrolls? I mean, they found the Dead Sea Scrolls It was founded by a Muslim from Beit Lahem in the Ta'mara village next to Beit Lahem there. And the entire scroll of Isaiah. And all the scholars are trying to analyze all the archaeological elements of the book instead of reading what it says in the beginning of it, you know. You people of Sodom, you rulers of Sodom, you people of Gomorrah. God is addressing the end of days, Christendom, Israel, everything. You know, and why is he addressing these nations, you people of Sodom, and you know, and he says the great city is Sodom, and you know, I wonder why haven't if really the interpreters were so brilliant and the scholars were so brilliant about understanding the scripture, why couldn't they figure out something so simple? You know, they parade their sins like Sodom does, yet they do not try to hide it. My gosh, I read that verse in Isaiah. I was flabbergasted. You parade your sins like Sodom does, and they do not even try to hide it. In other words, they parade in the streets and they don't even hide it. It's in the open. They're not even ashamed.
They even take children to them.
Yes, but when was the last time you walked into a Bible study or to a church or to a homily or and there's the priest or pastor telling you, hey, you know, they parade their sins like Sodom does. They don't even try to hide it.
Oh, no church actually does. They're too obsessed with Israel.
They're too obsessed with, yeah. There's an obsession. There's a healthy way to look at Israel, and there's an unhealthy way to look at Israel.
Michael Yarbrough died.
Okay, so what should we do?
I'm just wondering how he died.
Oh, Michael Yarbrough died. Okay.
My last question before I give it to someone else is the same one Guts kind of has. Basically, I've been curious to y'all's take, or how American evangelicals and Protestantism became so obsessed, and like, did it have anything to do with the American government? How does it relate to prophecy with the whole Zionist ideological movement?
Okay, when you talk about Zionism, okay, there's a Zionism, and there's many different. If you just look up Zionism, there's many different types of Zionism. Okay,
Wow.
the idea of people going back to the homeland is the idea that's set and etched in the scriptures. You can't escape it. It's there. Okay, but it doesn't mean that you go back to the land and you go back to your old ways. It's God. He says, I mean, God in the Bible, it's very clear. You know, he gives them the rule. When you go to the land, you must be this and this and that. If you don't do it, then all bets are off. And this is why Israel is attacked in the end. And this is why Israel's cities are destroyed. And so there is idea of Zionism, of going back simply after the Holocaust. They go back to their land, to their homes, you know, to establish communities. There are abuses that do happen. No question about it. There are abuses that do happen. You know, there are settlers who burn olive groves and do all kinds of crazy things. There is racism amongst the Zionist movement, you know, the ultra-Zionist or the Hasidic movement. You find this element of racism. There's no question about it. So there's abuses, there's no question about it. You know, but at the same term, you can't expect a Palestinian to put a bomb on a bus stop and then they give him a bouquet of flowers. You know, that's now so in other words, both sides there of the element of this Palestinian-Israeli issues that are wrong. The Palestinians, especially the Christian Palestinians, they're very ultra-nationalist. A lot of the religious Jewish community, they're ultra-nationalists too. So the problem with Israel-Palestinian affairs is ultra-nationalism. That's what it is. Once they understand there is neither Jew nor Gentile, that's when you can fix problems. Until you get there, you're not going to fix any problems. And so, you know, we get into the Zionism, you know, as a whole in general. You know, I am not against the establishment of a state of Israel.